Good morning, Isika. How are you doing? Okay. So last time we have talked about the essence of evolution, the variations, right? And also the Darwin's natural selection theory. So today we'll be proceeding ahead with that. So we'll be comparing Darwinism with Lamarckism, Neo-Lamarkism, and then switching on to Neo-Darwinism and completing the Darwin's theory, which is there in your course. So before that, I would like to tell you something about a specific topic known as adaptive radiation. Adaptive radiation, which is pretty significant once you talk about Darwinism in detail. So adaptive radiation, by the definition if you go, it is the process of evolution of different species. Evolution of different species in a given geographical area. In which different members of the same ancestral type are evolved along different lines in different habitats. Different habitats of the same area. It can also be called as an example of divergent evolution. Okay. Like if you take an example, you can take the examples of Darwin's finches or in marsupials or even in mammals. So what happens is if you just take a huge geographical area, okay, it shouldn't be a segregated area because one thing is there that a question comes in higher level if you take SAT or AP and all. The question comes is human evolution an example of adaptive radiation? So the answer is clear cut no because the continents have been segregated properly by specific physical barriers. You have water bodies among the continents. So you cannot just jump the water bodies and there will be no gene flow from position A to position B. Or if you think of it, suppose this is the specific area, here you have water body. So water body would cease the gene flow from area A to area B. There could be no more traversal or no more crossing over. One cannot travel from area A to area B at all. Like now we can travel, but in earlier times it was enough for ceasing the travel, right? Now we can travel by ships and planes, but in earlier times you could not just swim through the Atlantic Ocean and reach from India to US, right? Or Pacific Ocean. That wasn't a feasible option. So when the gene flow is ceased, what happens is you have something known as completely different habitats. So it is not fitting into the definition of adaptive radiation in which a given geographical area with different members of the same ancestral type are evolved. and evolved along different lines in different habitats of the same area. That is the definition. So it is not fitting. It is not the same area. Okay. But for example, let's take one big area. So if it is a huge area like Amazon rainforest, tundra rainforest, okay, not rainforest or tundra biome. So what happens is at one end you have species A, at another end you will be having species B. Or let's take the same species A, okay, but the habitat here in this region and this region, the habitat would be different. Okay. Habitat suppose is X here, habitat is Y here. Why I'm calling it X and Y? Because they will be different, because it's a huge area spanning thousands of kilometers. So the temperature setting, the resource setting, availability of the resources, availability of water would change. So that is known as adaptive radiation. So when you are subject to different types of habitat in a huge area, but the same area not segregated by a non-traversable physical barrier, okay, so then what will happen is, due to selective pressure, different habitat, different environment is putting selective pressure on A, different habitat, different environment is putting selective pressure on again species A, but these two are in different habitats but in the same area, but they are very, very distant from each other. Okay, so what is happening is, after tens of generations, what would happen is they would acquire variations which I talked to you about in the last class, and they would then adapt nucleotide changes, sequence changes, protein structural changes, conformational changes, adaptation, trait changes. Suppose they become species B, and this has again done the same thing, acquired variation, adapted, because adaptation is the key and variation is the essence of evolution. So now it has become species C, and now if you bring them together here, B and C, let them mate. If they cannot mate, or even if they do mate, they cannot give rise to, you can say, viable and fertile offspring. Viable and fertile offspring. That is the definition of speciation. Now, speciation has occurred. Formation of a species from the two pre-existing species. So, the presence of pre-existing species A is a must, because you cannot have a species jumping up from air, right? But due to adaptive radiation, this is also called as parapatric speciation, because there is no physical barrier. If physical barrier happens, speciation will happen. That is allopatric. Okay, if I put physical barrier in, but I am not putting any physical barrier. It is a type of divergent evolution only. Okay, divergent evolution can happen both ways. If I put a physical barrier, if I do not put, if I just segregate in a huge area. So adaptive radiation means segregating in a huge area. Okay, so what you have is, you have a common ancestor A, right? Both the ancestors are common A, but from A divergence is happening. You have species B, you have species C, right? So that is known as divergent evolution. You are diverging from the real ancestor A, means the biochemical similarities will be there, but the structure of the organ will somehow will be similar. Okay, they will show some homogeneity, but the function of the organs thus developed, or the characteristics of this species, the function of this species, the organ function will be different. They may be using their claws for digging in, they may be using their claws for, you can say, climbing the trees. But the shape of the claws, if you check, will be more or less same, because they have inherited, or they have been inherited from the same ancestor A. So it is a type of divergent evolution without any physical barrier. Okay, just by segregating in a huge area by a virtue of distance. That is known as adaptive radiation. You can have divergent evolution if you even segregate it. If you do segregation like this, why a physical barrier, again the same thing would happen. That is again the divergent evolution, but that is not adaptive radiation. Okay, that will be then known as allopatric speciation. Allopatric means you have a huge, you can say, physical barrier which cannot be overcome, which cannot be traversed, right? And this is a kind of parapatric speciation. This one is parapatric speciation, if you ask me. Parapatric speciation is more or less synonymous with adaptive radiation because the physical barrier existence is not there, but you have segregated on the virtue or of, you can say, or on the criterion of distance. Okay, so this is known as adaptive radiation slash divergent type of divergent evolution slash it is a type of parapatric speciation. Divergent evolution can also happen if you put a physical barrier, but that would be, you can say, contradicting the definition of adaptive radiation. So physical barrier I am not talking about here. If you put physical barrier, divergent evolution can still happen. That will be known as allopatric speciation. But physical barrier, if it is there, which cannot be traversed, that is not adaptive radiation. Any doubt, Ishika, here regarding the adaptive radiation process? And divergent evolution, why is it a type of divergent evolution? Okay, good. So now we'll be getting on to, first I'll explain the theory of Lamarckism to you, okay, and then we'll be switching on to Darwinism, okay, in detail. So Lamarckism, when you study evolution, this is a very, very fundamental thing. Lamarckism, fundamental theory, I should be saying. So it is also renowned, you can say, renownedly known by the name theory of inheritance of acquired characters. So by this sentence only, it should strike in your head that this theory doesn't hold good, or it is not completely logical, because how can you acquire acquired characters, or how can you transmit acquired characters? Suppose I cut the tail of a rat, and the rat is a male. Suppose the rat mates with a female, okay, and then they give rise to a baby rat, okay, the fetus, and then that rat would invariably have tail. So is it acquiring the acquired characters? No, it is impossible unless and until you have variation in the sex chromosome. And that too, not only the sex chromosome, you can have variation in any chromosome, but the variations should be present in the germ cells. That is the thing. If suppose germ cells, even in chromosome number 1, if you have got a mutation, germ cell is either your sperm produced in the testis, or either your ovum slash egg produced in the ovary. So if you have got variation in these two cells, then only they'll meet and produce zygote, and then only zygote can be having any kind of congenital disease. That is called as genetic disease. You can have cystic fibrosis, you can have muscular dystrophy, you can have SCID, you can have hemophilia, you can have sickle cell anemia, right? So various kinds of congenital genetic diseases are present, okay? So, but the thing is, you should have mutation in the germ cell. If you are having mutation in the somatic cell, suppose I have some mutation in the cells of my hand, but the cells or the sperm cells that I am producing are completely mutation less, or are completely mutation free, okay? So will my child have the disease or will my child get the mutation that my hand has, hand cells, epithelial cells? No. That is why the characters can only be transferred from sperm and ovum to the offspring. So if I chop off my hand, or if you chop off your hand, and your baby will not be produced with a chopped off hand because your ovum is completely fine, right? Same way the chopping of the tail doesn't hold true, okay? But he somehow proposed this. Why? Because there was a reason, okay? So I'll tell you the reasons also. So let's get down with this theory. So his complete name was John Baptiste de Lamarck, okay, in 1989, okay. He was a French naturalist, okay. He wrote his famous book in 19, or sorry, in 1809 AD, known as philosophic zoologique in French. It has been translated into English. Okay. So his theory is based on the inheritance of acquired characters, which are defined as the changes slash variations developed in the body of an organism from normal characters in response to the changes in the environment. So automatically it will be produced. That is what he said. Changes in the environment or in the functioning. This is again a great theory by him. Use and disuse. Okay, or in the functioning, that is known as use and disuse. This interests me a lot because it works sometimes of organs. That's why theory is not completely futile theory in their own lifetime. To fulfill their new needs. So thus Lamarck, he stressed on what? He emphasized on adaptation as means of evolutionary modification. So one, you can say, one of the targets he hit correctly. Okay, he nailed it that adaptation is required, use and disuse. I'll just show it to you how does it happen. Okay, and that's the only thing that works in his favor here. Okay, so the postulates of Lamarckism, if we talk about one by one, on which postulates are or is his theory based upon. So number one is new needs or wants. Or desires, whatever you want to call it. So as per him, every living organism is found in some kind of environment. That is correct. Okay. Now the changes, if at all it happen in environmental factors, because I told you environment is not a constant entity, it keeps on changing, and we also can change environment by our own actions, right? So the environmental factors or the changes which can be inculcated in the environment or environmental factors like light, temperature, food, air, okay, migration of the species, which we talked about in the last chapter. So if the environmental factors like light, temperature, okay, availability of resources, okay, like food, then water, then migration, immigration. So what would happen is it would lead to the new needs in the living organism, especially animals. Okay, he talked about especially animals. And these new needs, if you want to fulfill these new needs, the living organisms have to exert special efforts. And that special efforts could be inculcating changes in habits or behavior. So this somehow you can say correlates with what I have explained, but not completely. It is not new need, but it is the requirement of adaptation. Okay. So if you are not able to adapt, you must acquire variation and try to adapt. Okay, but he called it needs. So it's not really a need. That's a drawback, but he called it, suppose light and temperature, so new species coming in, so they will be feeling a need, and that will require them to change their behavior, not only behavior, but also their traits. Okay, so this is what he said. Next point what he said was, or what he mentioned was, use and disuse of organs. So the new habits which was talked about in point number 1 involves the greater use of certain organs, he said. Suppose some changes in the environment happened and that made an organism to use one of the organs more and more. Okay, that is known as the need to use certain organs more. Okay, the need arises which will make that or that especially that animal to use a certain organ more. And also that new need will lead to the disuse, okay, or lesser use of a certain organ. Some organ will be used more, some of the organs will be used less. That is what he meant. So lesser use of a certain organ. So both the things would occur simultaneously. Okay. So this use and disuse of organs would have a consequence. What kind of consequence? It will affect the form, structure and functioning of both the organs which are being used majorly and being used very less. Okay. So continuous and extra use of that specific organ will in turn after many generations will make them more efficient, while the continued disuse or lesser use of an organ, okay, will lead to their degeneration and ultimate disappearance. This is known as theory of use and disuse of organs. Okay, this is just point number 2. I'll give you certain examples also. Just hold on for 2 minutes. Let me complete the postulates first. So the third postulate is inheritance of acquired characters, which is impossible. Okay. Inheritance of acquired characters, impossible. So as per him, Lamarck firmly believed that acquired characters are inheritable and are transmitted to the offsprings. Okay, so that the offsprings are born fit to face the changed environmental conditions, and the chances or the probability of the survival will invariably then increase. But this is impossible, which I just showed you via logical biology, right? Then fourth point was speciation. So Lamarck also believed that in every generation new characters are acquired. Is completely false. You cannot acquire a new character in every generation. It takes time. The new characters are acquired in every generation, he said. And such variations will happen in such quick amount of time that new character will be acquired in every generation. You can say variations are acquired but not character. In order to translate variation into character, you would require a lot of accumulation of variations over a long period of time. Evolution is quite a gradual process, not like one generation will acquire so much variation that you will be acquiring a new character. But as per him, new character is acquired in every generation. Okay, and they are transmitted to the next generation. Okay, so that new characters accumulate generation after generation and species are formed, which is completely wrong. It is variation accumulation after many continuous ceaseless generations which lead on to speciation. Not that every generation will acquire a character completely and that will lead to speciation, but as per him, this is what speciation was. Okay, but in order to provide a theory, in order to give or in order to postulate a theory, you should have some evidences, right? So there must have been some evidences which assisted Lamarck to postulate a theory, and his theory held true or was considered one of the backbones of evolution for, you can say, many years, okay, about 100 years. So what kind of evidences did he have in his favor? So let's talk about the evidences, where I'll explain the use and disuse theory to you in detail. Okay, Evidences in favor of Lamarckism. What kind of evidences did he have which made people believe that Lamarckism theory is completely true? Lamarckism. Okay. So if you take the example of giraffe, so development of present day giraffe, just listen to this. No need to write too much here. Development of present day giraffe. Present day giraffe is like what? It has got a long neck. So the development of present day long necked and long four-limbed giraffe from deer-like ancestor, because giraffe didn't possess that long leg. Okay, that you can say extremely lengthened neck. It didn't possess the huge two front forearms. Okay, or long forearms or long four limbs. Okay, so the thing is, it was like deer. Okay, to deer-like ancestor. It occurred by the gradual elongation of neck and forelimbs in response to what? In response to deficiency of food on the barren ground in dry deserts of Africa. Okay, so the trees grew in length, and the giraffe had to make a conscious effort in order to reach the trees, in order to get food. So they kept on reaching, and that conscious effort that culminated into increase in the length of the forearm and neck, because these two organs were used excessively compared to their, you can say, back forearms or back limbs. Okay, so this conscious effort led to the elongation of these body parts to eat the leaves on the tree branches, which were taller in length. So this is an effect of, or exemplar of effect of extra use and elongation of certain organs. This held true. Coming on to snakes. If you come to snakes, okay, what happens is, you might be knowing that development of present day limbless snakes with long slender body from the ancestors of the snakes. The ancestors of the snakes were not limbless. They were having limbs. Okay, it occurred due to the disuse of the organ. Okay, what kind of disuse? Because the snakes wanted to slither. Okay, so if they were using limbs, it was causing a lot of noise. So they started disusing the limbs and stretching of their body to suit their creeping mode of locomotion, slithering mode of locomotion, because they wanted to attack from behind and didn't want any noise to happen. Okay, so in order to avoid all this, in order to avoid noise, in order to reduce noise, okay, what happened was, their creeping mode of locomotion and, you can say, fossorial mode of living out of fear of larger and more powerful mammals. This led to the loss of the limbs. So that is what? This use of the limbs led to their degeneration. So this also held true for, or as an evidence which was in favor of, you can say, Jean Baptiste de Lamarck, or simply Lamarckism. Okay. So mostly what happened is, there is an enhancer region. Okay. Enhancer region comes when I teach you genetics or complete molecular biology. This is the gene, this is the promoter region, this is the enhancer region in eukaryotes. So the enhancer region got silenced. Okay, it got some mutation and it got silenced. Okay, so in snakes, that's what happened. Okay, so that is known as sonic hedgehog pathway. This is what happened, but that is not in your course. So this is the evidence in favor of Lamarckism. Even if you look at aquatic birds, okay, development of aquatic birds like ducks, geese, etc., occurred from their ancestors by acquired characters like reduction of wings due to their continued disuse, development of webs between their toes for breeding purposes. Again, these extra changes were induced due to deficiency of food on terrestrial region or land and severe competition. Again, it is an exemplar of both extra use of skin and toes and disuse of wings of organs. One more evidence. If you want more evidence, development of flightless birds. Okay, flightless birds like ostrich from flying ancestors due to continued disuse of wings, as they were found in places which are well protected areas with plenty of food, so they didn't feel any need to fly. Okay, this was again one of the evidences. Then horse, the ancestor of modern horse, okay, used to live in the areas with soft ground and were short-legged with more number of functional digits, you can say 4 functional fingers and 3 functional toes in, you can say, dawn horse, the earlier horse. Now these gradually took to live in areas with dry ground in the present era. So this changed in habit and was accompanied by, you can say, increase in the length of the legs and decrease in functional digits for fast running over hard ground. Again, more and more use, so it led to degeneration of the lesser used or lesser needed counterpart, okay, the digits. Okay. But there were some criticism of Lamarckism also. If they were all true, how could it, you can say, stay true, right? So the criticism was given by a German biologist known as August Weismann, who proposed the theory of continuity of germ plasm. Continuity of germ plasm. Okay. So this theory states that it was given by Weismann, August Weismann. So this theory states that the environmental factors do affect only somatic cells and not the germ cells. Number 1. Only the somatic cells. Okay. And as the link between the generations is only through the germ cells and the somatic cells are not transmitted at all to the next generation, so the acquired characters must be lost with the death of an organism so that they should not have any role in evolution, which is completely true. Okay. He also suggested one more thing, that germ plasm is with special particles called IDS, which control the development of parental characters in offspring. Okay, that was again a problem. Okay, but he told that some of the examples he showed, like I showed you the example of cutting of the or chopping of the tail. Similarly, the boring of pinna in an external ear or nose in Indian women, if you bore it, will the boring remain in the baby which the mother gives birth to? No. Again, the tight waist of European ladies doesn't stay there. The circumcising, the removal of the prepuce in certain people, that doesn't stay. Small sized feet or small sized feet of Chinese women, they are not transmitted from one generation to another generation. Okay. One more thing are eyes which are being used ceaselessly and constantly they develop defects. Why does it happen? Because we are using eyes, so it must be more and more useful. But why do we need specs as the time grows or the time flies as we become older and older? That should not again coincide with the Lamarckism theory, right? Similarly, the size of the heart does not increase generation after generation, though it is used on daily basis. Since you are 3 months old in the womb till you die, the heart beats at least 1 lakh times a day. But hypertrophy is a pathological condition. If you have increased hypertrophy, you are in great trouble when it comes to heart. Okay, ventricular, left ventricular hypertrophy and all. So that doesn't happen. If it does happen, that means high blood pressure, high preload, high afterload. Okay. So that doesn't happen. And presence of weak muscles in the son of a wrestler. How can that happen? Because suppose I am a wrestler, I have good muscles. If my son is having weak muscles, how can that be true? Okay, so that is not explained by Lamarckism. So here a theory of Neo-Lamarkism or improved New-Lamarckism came in. Okay, so it was given by various scientists, T.H. Morgan, Spencer, Packard, and all. So Neo-Lamarckism, what did that say? So Neo-Lamarckism said postulates of Neo-Lamarckism. Neo-Lamarckism postulates. Number one, you can say germ cells may be formed from the somatic cells, which is true. It is formed from the stem cells, which are somatic cells. Okay. By the process of differentiation, okay, indicating similar nature of chromosomes and genes that make up the two cell lines, like if you have regeneration in earthworm, vegetative propagation in plants, okay. Then effect of environment of germ cells through somatic cells, okay. That is the second postulate. On germ cells through the somatic cells. Through the somatic cells. Like it was found that a pale variety of moth, okay, when fed on manganese coated food, a true breeding melanic variety of moth is produced. Okay, that was found. Okay, that is the explanation for that. One more was effect of environment directly on germ cells. That can also happen. So if you look at the example, suppose the young ones of some potato beetles, okay, when they are exposed to temperature fluctuation, and then it was found that though beetles remained unaffected with no somatic change, but next generation had marked changes in body coloration. That was found in one of the experiments. Okay. Another scientist confirmed that we all know that X-rays induce mutation. So the mutagenic role of X-rays on Drosophila, okay, confirmed the chemical mutagen. Okay, the role of chemical mutagen in Drosophila. Okay, and also one more thing was mentioned, that you can say it is not a pure chemical mutagen. X-ray, you can call it a radiation mutagen. Radiation induced mutations, radiation mutagen. When you talk about chemical mutagen, we can talk about mustard gas. So one of the scientists used a chemical mutagen known as mustard gas, vapor, causing mutation in Drosophila. Okay. X-ray can also cause mutation in Drosophila. This can also cause mutation in Drosophila, melanogaster, or fruit fly. Okay. So that means what? Germ cells are not immune from the effect of mutation. Okay. And germ cells will be directly affected by the environmental factors or can be affected by somatic changes also. Okay, so both could be true. So this is all about Neo-Lamarkism. Okay, so it doesn't talk about only acquired traits. It doesn't talk about, you can say, speciation by acquiring direct characters acquisition in one generation only. Okay, so these are the improvements in the Lamarckism theory. Okay, that is known as Neo-Lamarckism. Now, when we come on to, you can say, Darwinism, so we had talked about the various phases of Darwinism. Okay, so we have talked about geometric increase, we have talked about limited food and space, we have talked about struggle for existence, we have talked about variation, okay. We have talked about natural selection or survival of the fittest. We'll talk about this again. Then we'll talk about inheritance of useful variations and then speciation. Okay. So now tell me, any doubt in Neo-Lamarckism or Lamarckism here? Yeah, environmental factor affecting only the somatic cells. So environmental factor, okay, there is a term that environmental factor can only affect somatic cells, but that is again a subjective thing, because the ovum and testis, they are not exposed, they are pretty deep, okay, in the body. Ovum is pretty deep and testis are in the, you can say, hanging outward, but still they are protected. So environmental factors will be like what? Like heat and all. So mostly the body is affected by the environmental factor more. Okay. So the thing is, when you get affected, the somatic cells will be the first one to get affected. But it is not to circumvent the theory that suppose if you are taking a specific drug, suppose you are getting ill due to an environmental factor like heat, you have had heat stroke and something, you are taking a drug, and that the metabolite of that drug can reach the testis, it can reach the ovum and can again cause mutation in testis and ovum also. So that can happen. But mostly what we are drinking, what we are eating, it is going on to our digestive system. What we are breathing, it is going on to our lungs, right? So that is more of somatic cells are involved rather than any kind of germ cells while encountering any mutagen. Okay, when you are exposed to radiation, it is not that your testis will be exposed first. Okay, your hands are open and all, they'll be exposed first. If it goes through the, you can say, the genes and all, then that testis can be affected. It can be, but again a minute chance is there. Okay, so any doubt, Ishika? Any more queries regarding Lamarckism and Neo-Lamarckism? Okay. So when we come to natural selection, under Darwinism, so it is also known as survival of the fittest. Okay, Darwinism, specifically Charles Robert Darwin, called natural selection as survival of the fittest. So Darwin stated that as man selects the individuals with desired characters in artificial selection, nature also does the same thing. Nature selects only those individuals out of the population which contain or which comprise of useful continuous, or you can say favorable ceaseless continuous variations, and are best adapted to that specific habitat, or you can call it to that specific environment. Whereas the less fit organism or individuals will be eradicated or are rejected by the environment. So nature selects only those individuals out of the population which are comprising of useful, or I should say favorable, that would be a better term, favorable variations, and are best adapted to the environment. While the less fit or unfit individuals are eventually rejected, or I should be saying eradicated by nature. Eradication of the weak by nature. That's how nature keeps the population under check. Otherwise, I told you that nature is also selfish. If you keep on increasing in population, in proliferation, which I talked in detail in case of the J-shaped curve, or even in the logistic curve, that if curve flattens in J-shaped, you have a population drop, okay, mass extinction. So why does it happen? Otherwise, it would keep on, you will keep on devouring, and you will keep on using up all the resources that are available to you. In the end, the nature will be out of resource. Okay, so the nature doesn't want that. So it will put selective pressure. It will keep your population in check so that the nature can also sustain itself. Okay, so it is a correlative thing. Okay. So next we will be coming on to inheritance of useful variations in case of natural selection in Darwin, and then I'll explain to you the three types of natural selections. Useful variations. Okay. Charles Robert Darwin, he believed that the selected individuals, means which whatever individuals have been selected by nature, okay, the fit ones, carrying the superior traits, the superior genetic variants or variations, they will be able to pass on their useful variation. They will be able to transmit their favorable variations to the or to their offsprings, and this will lead to the success of the species, because as a species what you want is to proliferate or to transmit and to propagate the useful variations. If you are not able to propagate, then you are not contributing anything towards the proliferation of the species. You are only contributing towards the proliferation of the species once you are able to propagate. Okay, once you are able to propagate the favorable variations, then only your species will be heavily benefited. Otherwise, you are not. Suppose you are extremely fit. Okay, you are an athlete. You are like Venus Williams, an athlete, or you are like, if you will be knowing that the chemistry Nobel Prize went to or was awarded to Emmanuel Charpentier, a French scientist, and Jennifer A. Doudna. Okay, so they discovered in 2012 in the University of California the CRISPR-Cas9 genetic engineering tool. Okay, clustered regularly interspaced short palindromic repeats is CRISPR, and there is a specific nuclease, okay, CRISPR associated nuclease, that is known as Cas9. Okay, now various variants are there. CPF is there, CPF1, CPF12, lots of variants are there. So that is a bacterial immune system which is used for gene editing in plants, in animals, sickle cell anemia. Yesterday there was a news which came that CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing helped a boy who went blind for 8 years. Now he can see, his vision has returned. So anything is possible via CRISPR-Cas9. And the biological Nobel went to the discoverers of hepatitis C virus. You can say Alter William, and you can say Michael M. Rice. Okay. So, and Crowton, these three scientists were there. So, and physics Nobel Prize went for relativity theory, right? So, Primrose and all. So, they were awarded the physics Nobel Prize. So, the thing is, if you are a Nobel laureate, you should be able to transfer your genes which made you so intelligent to your offspring. And if you are doing that, you are doing a huge favor to your specific species in general. But if you're, you can say, offspring is being born and he's being born and he grows up to become a completely dumb individual, a non intelligent individual who doesn't compare to your intelligence, then you have not caused any benefit to the environment. Then the last part is the speciation. Okay. Speciation means, I have told you many times, that as per Darwin also, useful variations appear in every generation. What he said was variation, not character. So variations do appear almost in every generation. Okay. And are inherited from one generation to another. Therefore, what would happen is the useful or you can say favorable variations, they keep on getting accumulated. It is the correct order. Logically, they keep on getting accumulated, and after a certain number of generations, 10 or 20, the variations become very, very prominent in those specific genes where it has occurred, and that leads to the individual becoming a new species, either allopatric or parapatric or sympatric, peripatric, whatever it is, it will become a new species. And then when you mate the two species, they cannot mate, and even if they do mate, they will not be able to produce a viable and futile offspring. Viable and fertile offspring. So this will not be produced. So as per Darwin, Charles Robert Darwin, evolution is a gradual process and speciation occurs by gradual changes in the existing species. Okay, so that is what Charles Robert Darwin, the father of evolution, he believed in. Okay, now you can have three ways of, you can say, natural selection. One would be directional natural selection. Okay, one would be your, you can say, stabilizing natural selection. One would be your disrupting natural selection, and then would be coming your genetic drift. Okay, so I'll tell you the types of, explain it to you, the types of natural selection. Okay. So in the next class we'll be doing the types of natural selection, and then we'll be covering the Neo-Darwinism, and then most probably we'll come towards the end of your chapter. So any problem in this lecture, Ishika? Any kind of queries in this lecture? So evolution has direct consequence on your entire, you can say, existence. Everything that you do is directly dependent on or upon evolution only. Okay, so stay safe and be ready, get ready for school, and have a nice day, and thanks a lot. Let's meet you in the next class, Ishika. Thank you.